นะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะอปารุธาเดสังอมัตถัสสะทาวราเยสุรวันทาบามุจันทุสัทัง So it's nice to see so many people here, and these Sunday talks, I call them rather than talks or anything, they're like reflections, reflecting from my own experience. Because it's not like teaching you about Buddhism, but sharing what I've learned in my own life through the practice and development, following the instructions of the Buddha. And the subject, of course, is patient endurance, and this is a condition, absolute necessity for almost anything worth doing. Patience is something that is not greatly encouraged in modern life because we like efficiency and like instant results. And I was noticing how, like the internet and the computers, how you don't really have to wait for much anymore. You just don't have to go to the library. You just use somebody's laptop and they can find out almost anything you want to know about. And of course, when I went to stay with Ajahn Chah in Northeast Thailand, that was 1967, that the main instruction he gave me for the first year was to develop patience. And I guess he could see that was something I lacked, because Americans were not noted for that virtue, and it's not mentioned very much. You know, it's not raised up in a high position in the psyche. Where in Buddhism, of course, it's a very, very important virtue, paramita, to develop, because without it, then of course we find life endlessly frustrating and difficult. And of course, forbearance also means to be able to bear with disappointment, sadness, and pain, and not getting what you want, and your life going in the wrong way, and you're being deserted or betrayed by your friends or whatever. These are all part of everyone's life experience to a certain degree, so that we have to forbear, endure, and be patient. Now, the modern life, I was brought up with more of the Cinderella story, of finding the right person and living happily ever after. And there's the idea that life should be happy, and we should, have a very positive, optimistic view of it. And so there's so much emphasis in the American society, anyway, that I grew up in, on being happy, and that if you weren't happy, that you were mentally sick or something was wrong with you. So there was a lot of, it was in the 40s and 50s, the pop songs were, always smile when you're miserable. On the other side of every rain cloud is a silver lining. So that is, the kind of cheer up and life is to be enjoyed attitude, which I'm not against. I'm not trying to just knock it down, but also it's not to be believed in, because life is, for each one of us, we have our own individual problems to deal with, our own peculiar karmas. We have our national karmas, our religious and racial and generation. I mean, everything is not going to be, what we want and what we even expect from life. But one thing can be sure, it is the way it is in the present moment. And so a lack of patience always implies this sense of time. Time is our reality. And of course this is, the society, modern society is very much considering time as reality. We have our diaries, calendars, clocks and so forth that we follow. We religiously follow. And even I resisted it when I first came to live in England, but I had to give in to it. So I have my diary and my calendar, and then innumerable clocks people give me. But the patience is always, trying to. You can imagine what you'd like and the end result, or when you want something, then you can conceive of the goal or the ideal of getting it. But then that's in the mind, which moves very quickly. But then we have to wait for the conditions to happen, which can be very difficult, very slow. So then we become impatient, or we give up, or we just get angry. And if we never investigate this feeling and lack of patience in ourselves, then of course we'll never really understand the purpose of our life or how to live it properly. Because I know most of you who have had the opportunity to be parents must, recognize the importance of patient endurance. More so than I think anyone else. And this is, because this is a quality that is necessary with children giving birth, raising children. And yet the society is not that way. And the society we live in is about, getting what you want and efficiency and getting what you want as quickly as possible. And of course we can see at this time the economic crash and all the problems that the economy has experienced these past several years is because of a lack of patience. And there was this kind of call it illusion that the whole world seemed to get caught up into the progress, the economic bubble, and you can get what you want before you even have the money. You just want it, and somehow you can find the means to get it. And then of course many people have suffered enormously through loss of their homes or things that have of great importance to them in their lives, that were bought in this ideal of getting what you want as soon as possible or immediately. In meditation, the meditation is, as most of you who've ever attempted meditation probably realize, is always frustrating, this desire to get a good result. And it's we can understand the instructions. Usually it's presented so that it sounds quite simple. It is quite simple in its essence and in its explanation. But in the practice, of course, you can imagine a state of mind that is peaceful, where your negative feelings, emotions, problems drop away, and you're in a state of bliss. But for most of us, when we practice formal meditation, especially the first few years, is we seldom get these moments of bliss and peace because of the rapidity of our thoughts and our emotional habits that seem to take us over, even in a meditation hall. So I remember this cartoon years ago, I think in some journal, Buddhist journal, where they had this kind of cartoon of somebody sitting in lotus posture, beginning to meditate, and then the figure could be male or female sitting there, and then the one cartoon says think, and then the next picture think, and then by the end it's think through the whole body. And most of us found that we could relate to that. And so the thinking process, recognize how fast thinking is. Thinking is, a very rapid condition, and of course it's a proliferating condition. You start with some stimulation to think a certain thing, and then it proliferates on through memory, through emotion, through the conditions that are supporting it in the present. And of course we're a thinking society. Sometimes, I feel that Western society has promoted thinking as the kind of great achievement of humanity, like especially not just any kind of thinking, but analysis, scientific thought, reason, and logic. It's kind of the summum bonum of human existence, like somebody who really can think rationally, reasonably, is probably, the ultimate in our society. And of course, being able to think is a great gift, but also, if we have no perspective on thinking, if we get caught in the proliferating habits of thought, then of course we become victims of our own thought, and they become repetitious, they become obsessed. We suffer all kinds of mental stress and from just the rapidity and anxiety that we create through worrying about the future, or regretting, feeling guilty about the past. How even in the midst of a paradisical situation on a holiday, you can be obsessed with regret or remorse or guilt about something you said just before you left home, or worrying about, did you switch off the electricity, or and one can ruin one's holiday by just being obsessed with something about the past or the future while you're in maybe some beautiful tropical paradise. And this is, most of us have found, even when we try to escape the hurly-burly, the rush and fuss of daily life and the pressures of society, going off to some idyllic setting, how we can carry with us those kind of habits, obsessive habits that can take us over even under the most benign conditions, most pleasant situations. So, in many ways, the human species, we are haunted by our own minds. I mean, we have to live in this state, within this human form, on this planet, for a lifetime with this kind of mental conditioning, without much perspective on it. I never really understood thinking as a function so much as just I always was thinking about thinking, or thinking about not thinking, or trying to think positively about life and suppressing negative thinking, or getting caught up in negative thinking, being miserable and wallowing in my misery, and feeling of despair or depression that I could create through thinking about the disappointments or the betrayals or my own inadequacies in regards to what I see and remember in my life. Also, I notice so many people are, very tyrannical in their minds toward themselves, very self-disparaging. So that this seems to be quite common in this society to see, mainly to emphasize the flaws, the weaknesses, the faults that you see in yourselves, or emphasize the things you've done wrong in your life. We can blame ourselves, and that kind of obsession, of course, carries through into old age. Feeling of not being good enough, not being worthwhile, because we made mistakes or did things that we shouldn't have, or whatever. And then we can be obsessed, really fixed on that through a lifetime. And that's why we need to go to psychotherapists and because we want to know, is there something to do about this habit? I've noticed in my own life, that so much of my emotional tendencies were formed when I was in the formative years of life, when I was a small child. And as I grew older, of course, you tended to, be quite embarrassed by some of the childish reactions you could have toward life, which you learned how to hide or cover up or try not to let anybody know. But you could still feel, sense of not getting what you want, feel like, sulking. I could see some, a tendency in me when I don't get what I want to, there's a inner movement to sulk about it. And when somebody I feel hasn't conducted themselves properly and I feel betrayed by them, I don't want to speak to them anymore. Do you have any similar feeling? and of course these are probably, emotional habits that I developed in childhood, in early childhood. My mother tells me very embarrassing stories about how I embarrassed her by throwing tantrums in public. But then in meditation, what the value of this perspective, what we call meditation, is it's not about thinking or rearranging your thoughts or being positive about life or trying to improve your personality, but to get perspective on what you think you are, the perceptions, the emotional tendencies, habits that you have, the memories, and the thinking process that you have, and not to criticize it, not to put in terms of you shouldn't react like that, or you should grow up and not sulk or throw tantrums or things like this, but it's about more or less observing. So this observing ability is the essence of Buddha's teaching. It's this mindfulness. It's the only way we have to get perspective on the thinking mind and on the emotional habits that we have at the same moment. So we can call it intuitive awareness, intuition. It's not something you cultivate through thinking or through theories. It's innate in us. But somehow it's become almost rejected or mistrusted or not noticed, not given any importance in our lives, because we have, modern education is all about passing examinations and acquiring knowledge and being able to regurgitate knowledge and think creatively and with reason and logic and acquire information and be able to reproduce it. and then that gives us that's what we're used, that's what we're educated for, that's what our conditioning amounts to. Now, religious life, now in this time, I notice here in Britain, there's so much, investigation into what is religion about. It's quite an interesting time to live here because, it has a strong religious tradition before Christianity. You look at don't have to travel very far on the British Isles to come across dolmens and various other forms of religious endeavors before Christianity ever appeared in the world. And last Monday, I had this opportunity to go to the Skellig Michael off the southwest coast of Ireland, this amazing island rock where about 12 kilometers from Kerry, County Kerry, where these monks, 6th century Christian monks, Celtic monks, built a monastery, built kind of hermitage on top of this incredible rock. It's an island out in the sea, and it's all jagged rocks, and they built these, what they call beehive hermitages. They're shaped like a beehive made out of rocks. And they still exist, and they built walls, and it took 5 hours for them to row to the mainland. And they must have lived on moss and fish and puffins. They're a lot tougher than we are here. I felt slightly embarrassed calling myself a monk when I was there, because but it is, the modern life and the modern society it's very idealistic, and it also is impatient. It's trying this idea of progress, desire to get something, make everything right, straighten out all the wrinkles, set everybody straight, give them the right form of government, invade Iraq and give them good old American democracy. Don't wait, but just invade and make them democrats like the Americans are. And of course this has been a disaster because there's no patience, and of course we suspect there were other motives. It wasn't even that, because the Americans aren't that stupid, but they certainly, that was one of the reasons for, getting rid of a horrendous tyrant and putting in the proper democratic system. Like living in Thailand, I noticed, I went there to live in 1966. And for the first few months I taught in the university in Bangkok, in Thammasat University, taught English. And they gave me students who had been to American high schools and had already quite a good command of English. And they wanted me to just talk with them to develop their ability to understand conversations. So it's quite fun because, they were young university students, could speak English quite well, and they were quite, bright, beautiful looking people. And I asked, of course I had, when my university days, I was in Berkeley, which was University of California, which was a center for discontentment and protest. And you felt obliged to protest everything. And at Thammasat University in Bangkok in 1966, they were the most docile university students I've ever met. And they didn't have one rebellious streak in them that I could detect. And I asked them what their goal in life was, and they said, to finish the university, get a good job, and help support our parents. And that never occurred to me as a goal. Never thought of it even as a possibility. And of course, at the time in 1966, Thailand was under a military dictatorship. So they had, in every shop, they had the pictures of these two generals, big portraits of these two impressive-looking army generals in the train stations, in the shops, everywhere. And of course, I wasn't politically inclined anyway, and it was still, Thailand under a military dictatorship for my life didn't really affect me very much. Because I could, of course, come and go as I wanted. But the university students, they didn't mention or complain about the dictatorship. And so I thought, well, maybe I better not, I could get a bad name if I stirred up things. So I was more on a spiritual quest, and I chose Thammasat University because then it was across the street from one of the main temples where I could go and meditate in the afternoon. So I had my own agenda. I'm not a revolutionary. But then, of course, democracy was a word that was in the vocabulary, and but it wasn't, like foremost in the consciousness of people at that time in Thailand, at least who I met. Then when I went to live in the Northeast, which was, Bangkok was the more like the cosmopolitan center of Thailand, but the Northeast was very kind of backcountry, out of the way, most undeveloped part of Thailand. And so I lived with just village people for 10 years or so, with mainly like peasants, rice-growing people who just were good Buddhists and had their own kind of cultural value. The dictatorship in Bangkok didn't seem to influence them terribly. They did have, while I was there during those 10 years, there were several revolutions, but in northeast Thailand where I lived, you would hardly have known anything happened. So, this is, and the Thais also in northeast Thailand, being of a different time, a different generation, not being where education was so important, where most of them only had very little education. Many were illiterate, but they did have a cultural integrity that I quite appreciated, and it was based on Buddhism. And of course, with living with somebody like Ajahn Chah, he was a very fine monk, very strong leader of people, so he had a very good influence on the surrounding villages that would look to our monastery, to his monastery for guidance. So I came across, something that was completely new to me, but quite old. I never lived in such a situation. And in training as a Buddhist monk, in a very conservative tradition. It was a totally new experience, because Americans, we are kind of against tradition. We think, we always want to rebel against tradition and restraint. We want freedom, and we want to express ourselves and make demands, but in monastic training it was all about surrendering, conforming, and then the point was not through, it wasn't a tyrannical system like the monastery wasn't, Ajahn Chah wasn't a tyrant by any means, but the importance of the training was not to endlessly try to improve or change the structure that you're living in, but to observe yourself. Develop that intuitive awareness, which I found very revealing to me during those 10 years I lived in northeast Thailand. Because I would never have seen so clearly the the power of my habits in such clarity without, such a clear reflection and encouragement, where our life was very much aimed at mindfulness, reflection on things rather than on trying to improve and make things better and rebel against the system and develop, trying to work toward better ideal monastery. In those days, Wat Ba Pong wasn't so famous, and at that time also, Northeast Thailand, they were building roads, but it wasn't a very, the infrastructure of Thailand in those days was not very good. So they had a train that took 12 hours from Bangkok to Ubon, and we had to sit on board. They didn't even have padded seats for 12 hours sitting on a train going across Thailand. That takes, this was to survive this train ride, you had to develop patience. And then we also had to develop, every week we had to sit up all night long. We had what they call Nesachik Vata practice once a week, where we would have to sit up till dawn and then go on the alms round, and you're just always fighting against or feeling sleepy and tired, and it brings up so many negative emotions. And of course, on a practical level, became very critical of this. I said, this is not good for my health. It just makes me grumpy. And I could explain, all the reasons why we shouldn't be doing this. But somehow, I didn't dare complain about it because nobody else did, so I just did it. And then also, the emphasis on mindfulness, being aware of what does come up in your mind, of the feelings, the emotions, and in your body, mind and the body, to be the observer. And so trying to get results, remember trying to get so much emphasis that the Western world had when I lived in Bangkok, like the expatriate Buddhists that I'd meet in Bangkok before I became a monk, where they were always talking about attaining, like becoming the stream emperor, attaining the jhanas, these levels of concentration. So we would read the scriptures in the Visuddhimagga and these books with a Western attitude toward attainment. And so, I read Majjhima Nikaya before I ever ordained. And I must say, after several years of meditation, I reread it, and it was very different than what I... Did it change or I did? But anyway, all I had was a Western trained mind, Western attitude, that could, understand the words, the translations of the Majjhima Nikaya into English from Pali, could understand the words, but, it was just an intellectual thing, and I didn't quite get the profundity or the meaning of it. It was merely, the best I could say that some of it inspired me, some of it I couldn't fathom at all. Then in the expatriate Buddhist world, the aim was to get something, get somewhere. Get the most you can out of Buddhism. Find some place where you can get the most, where you can get enlightened quickly, and get concentration, get jhanas, get and attain. And this, of course, was the way I thought also. This was just natural, according to the way my mind was conditioned. So, this is what I was trying to do. But one reason why I stayed with Ajahn Chah there was 10 years, I stayed with him. I would have stayed longer if he hadn't sent me off to England. But, was because he changed my attitude, and this desire to attain and achieve and get somewhere and be somebody and was challenged all the time, because our life wasn't like some of you might think. Our life was very much like sitting in meditation for hours on end and like very like extreme forms of meditation practices that we did continuously day and night for years and years. But I found living with Ajahn Chah we did most of our day was caught up in work. And I've never, been very good at building. But during those years I learned to lay bricks and render bricks and this menial chores like carrying water from wells on bamboo poles and sweeping the ground. I learned how to sew robes and how to dye robes in ancient. Ajahn Chah wouldn't even allow modern dyes for years. We all had to use these old-fashioned jackfruit natural dyes, which takes a long time, takes hours and several days to get this color. And then Wat Pah Pong in those days was the main city in that. It's Ubon, which is the kind of provincial capital, and then across the river from Ubon city is another big town called Warin. And then Wat Pah Pong was about 12-15 kilometers from Warin. And then the roads were just dirt roads, so we had to, people in the rainy season couldn't get there in cars unless they had four-wheel drive. And Ajahn Chah was trying to keep it in this very primitive level, because there were a lot of people interested in trying to modernize Wat Pah Pong, and he would always be slowing it down. Like we had to, one of our duties every day was to draw water from a well, and so we had several wells, and then we had to, they had pulleys on. That was the modern technology that Ajahn Chah allowed. And we had kerosene tins. Kerosene comes in big tins like this, and you would put these on a rope and lower it down, fill it up with water, and then several monks would pull on the rope, and so this was. So if you wanted water all by yourself, to do this was quite arduous, all on your own. Usually the whole emphasis was on everybody working together, helping each other. Of course, this was something totally new to me, because I'm from where you learn to take care of yourself and not worry about the others. And Chah was trying to get us all to help each other, even for the simple task of getting a glass of water. And so I asked him about this, because people from the town would offer to buy pumps, where you could just pump the water up. And Luang Por Chah said, no, if we get pumps, the monks will become lazy. So now they have pumps, but for years, the years I lived there, they didn't. And then the road to Wat Pah Pong was impassable during the rainy season. And now they have nice paved tarmac roads all over Thailand. They say modern progress takes care of itself. And Wat Pah Pong now has become very kind of modern, and it's not like that, but it was like it was when I first went there. But it was interesting to live like that, because it did develop patience. And you had to work as a community. You were involved with each other in the very basics of just food and drink, and you're totally dependent on others for food, and then you take whatever shelter is made available to you. So you learn how to to just, instead of always trying to get better things, or trying to improve or modernize, Luang Por Chah wanted us to see, to observe this desire that makes us restless and unhappy and drives us always to try to be efficient and improve and on what we have already and for the sake of progress. Now this is just to reflect on this, like the word progress. What is how does that word affect you? Like people have criticized us here for not because we're not progressive in the sense that we think the West is somehow progressed beyond just an ancient tradition from India, and that we should modernize Theravada Buddhism so it's in line with modern attitudes of progress and all the rest that goes along with that. So that because this seems logical, it seems the right thing to be doing, to try to improve. There's a strong tendency for Westerners to think they can improve Buddhism. So when I've heard this from many, how to improve, make it more modern, more useful, more up to date. The attitude of wanting to spread Buddhism, like we're missionaries and we're here to convert everybody to Buddhism and to, to write books and now it's all over websites and everything is I have a website I've never even looked at. Honestly, I've never seen the website. If you look for, I think, Ajahn Sumedho or something, you will find one. So you don't even have that much control anymore. But and this is progressive, and in some ways it's kind of magical and wonderful. The way information about Buddhism is available now to everybody all over the world. And we get letters from remote parts of the planet, people who found our name here at Amaravati through a website, from some remote part of Argentina or someplace, suddenly you find somebody wanting more information or get the newsletter or whatever. Now that's very good. It's not to criticize it, but also what I'm trying to do is reflect on the dangers of efficiency and progress, because it does create this sense of that we've got to get something, make it better, rather than observing this tendency in ourselves, observing the way our mind tends to be discontented and critical of the way it is. Here in England, I've lived in the UK now for 34 years, and I've never seen people really content with the governments that exist. And comparatively speaking, even the worst government that I've experienced here during 34 years is not that bad. So when compared to other countries. So I mean, it is, but it's a powerful emotion that we have of not being in the present, not knowing what we're feeling, but always looking for something we don't have, which creates this impatience. And of course, economic progress. If a Buddhist would say, well, of course, you get economic bubble, everything goes kind of marvelously, everything's getting better and better, but it has to reach a peak. It can't just get better and better. That's not the way things are. And so that when they reach their peak, then they go the other way. They get worse and worse. To a Buddhist who's meditated on the Dhamma, then we're quite aware of this, of this changingness. And how, you can't just be happy and have that emotion all the time. It reaches a peak and then it goes the other way. You can't stay interested in something and sustain it for a long time. You reach a peak and then you become disinterested in what you were interested in before. In relationships, we think, the Cinderella story, Prince Charming, shoe fits, live happily ever after. But as all of you know, relationships, they start out maybe inspiration, romantic, and they get up to a peak and then they start going the other way. Now, the honeymoon's over that time. But this is just the natural pattern of conditioned phenomena. It's not your fault or anyone's fault. And this is where mindfulness allows us to observe this, in our minds. We don't have to see it on such a vast scale as universal expansion and contraction, but just on the thinking, emotional habits that we have within ourselves, plus the condition of our physical condition. The aging process is teaching us all the time, about the way things are. And that happiness, its counterpart is suffering. So you have, in the terms of the thinking process, is what we call dualistic. So if you have happiness, then automatically you have unhappiness along with it. They go together. And you have birth and then death. So birth, and then what was born will die. And what begins ends. We call this cause and effect, or law of karma. In Buddhist meditation, you're always observing anicca, or impermanence, of your breath, of how the inhalation reaches a peak and then the exhalation takes place. So in this way, it's intuitive. It's not just rational. It's observing, just with simple things like breathing or emotions. They arise and they cease. So you feel anger rising, and then if you're patient with the feeling of anger or unhappiness, you can actually, if you're patient and endure the feeling and let it be what it is, it will cease, and you'll be aware of its absence, of non-anger. So this is what patient forbearance allows us, gives us this perspective to understand the way things are in the realm that we're experiencing so intensely through the body and through the senses. Otherwise, we don't know who we are or what life is about. We're merely caught in the programs that we've developed or been instilled in us from birth, kind of helpless victims of them. And then we wonder what life is about. And then many people nowadays feel so despairing or disappointed with their lives because they're expecting much more than what they have. And then old age, it's not, I hear on science programs and that they've found ways now of stopping the aging process, and they hope that they can prevent us from getting old. Well, it's too late for me. But some of these monks probably can stay young and good looking for a much longer time. But this is, this is the idea of old age as somehow, something we should conquer or get rid of, or death, rather than understand. So now we get to this word understanding, and this, of course, is a common enough word in English, but it's a profound understanding. It's not just understanding the meaning of words or ideas or concepts. It's, like what we say, a gut kind of knowledge. It comes from insight, from really investigating and knowing, the way things are. And of course, what you investigate and reflect on is what you have, the way you are, your body, your conditioning, your emotions, your memories, thoughts, tendencies, good, bad, right or wrong. It's no matter a critical attitude that you're having about how you should or shouldn't be. You're taking a position, what we call transcendent, or the knowing position, intuitive knowing, witnessing, observing how, that which arises ceases. You're aware of its presence. And with patient endurance, then, and you're not just reacting and trying to control, get rid of, or follow, then you also, with patience and forbearance, you'll see it cease. You'll observe its cessation. What is it then that observes? This observing is not, it's no longer something you learn from somebody else. It's what we call intuitive intelligence operating through these forms. And we can recognize this great gift that we have only through awareness of it. It's not something you can take and show to anyone. It doesn't, people, we all sense it, we all feel it, but we don't understand it when we try to describe it or define it. And of course, consciousness, the word consciousness now is a big subject in psychology and psychiatry and science. It's, what is consciousness? And you hear this, a lot in modern, in the Western world. And consciousness, of course, is here and now. We're all conscious, aren't we? Anyone here not conscious? And then, so it's not something that we have to define or find out what scientists say about consciousness, but to observe. Consciousness allows us to observe conditioned phenomena. We can, through mindfulness, then we can, and mindfulness with patient forbearance and endurance, we begin to observe, be the knower, conscious knower of conditioned phenomena. And then that puts us into these symbols of Buddha knowing Dhamma. So this is kind of basic in Buddhist terminologies, Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha. And it's no longer, personal. It's not a personal quality. It's not Ajahn Sumedho knowing the Dhamma, or Ajahn Sumedho's opinion about Buddhism. Because then that can get, that comes from a different place. That's not the way I experience it, not through Ajahn Sumedho and what I think about Buddhism, but it's through the practice of mindfulness, getting to recognize and value, appreciate this ability that we have to observe the way things are. So Dhamma is the way things are. It's reality itself. So I think, what's the real world? What's real? And this is real. Awareness, consciousness with awareness and wisdom. Then we're within these very limited forms that we have, our human forms, and our conditioned habits and tendencies. This is the way that we can escape just being helpless victims of conditioned, emotional conditions, or the conditions of the world and planetary life that we have to experience. Because then we can see, we have this chant I've introduced here at Amaravati in the past year, that we have in our chanting book now, Ati Bhikkhave Ajatang Aputang Akatang Asankadang. And there is bhikkhus, the unborn, uncreated, unformed, unconditioned. And so this fascinated me as a statement. This is a fact. It's not just an abstract, an idea. I think, it's probably a state or a non-state, non-conditioned, where you get your brain into a twist, trying to verbalize something that is beyond words. So, but it is reality itself, so that this mindfulness that is emphasized, that is the essence of Buddha Dhamma, is the way to contact that, to recognize, to understand Amaravati, the deathless realm, or whatever, not the monastery, the deathless I don't understand the monastery, but the deathless realm is something, is reality itself. Now don't believe this is not to be taken as dogma, or my pronouncements, because it's not personal, but it is realizable. And then that each one of us has that potential to realize truth, ultimate reality, to recognize it. It's our true nature. And when that is realized, then we have perspective on the conditions that we have to live with, whatever, their qualities might be, good, bad, right or wrong, happy or unhappy. So this is, in meditation, is willing to, not just to, it's not like, I used to consider like sitting up all night on these observance nights in Thailand a form of torture. I used to think Ajahn Chah liked to torture us. I suspected him of being a sadist sometimes. And so because I found it torture. I didn't like doing it at all. And so then, you're thinking, well, this isn't necessary. The Buddha said in his first sermon, it's the middle way. It's between asceticism and sensory indulgence. So Ajahn Chah is going towards the ascetic side. He's too ascetic. And then I could hear my own complaining, opinionated, arrogant feeling. And I realized he wasn't asking me to do anything dangerous. It's just something I didn't like doing, that's all. And so that was what was important. That's what he was pointing at. What he was helping me to see was my own, how the suffering I create onto the restriction, the forms, the tradition, and the way I had to live. If I was going to live at that monastery, I had to follow and live like that. And then that would, of course, bring up resistance and stubbornness and all kinds of emotions that I had, being from a different culture, which was very much do what you want, no boundaries, just follow your heart wherever. And then you're in a traditional Theravadan monastery in northeast Thailand where it's all conforming. Well, both are. One is a structure, that it doesn't give you boundaries. It has no boundaries. It's just follow desire. And then the Theravadan monastery, Ajahn Chah's monastery, was frustrating that tendency, but not just to torture us, or because we have a kind of something against happiness and desire and sensory pleasure, but in order to observe, to give us limitation for on action and speech too, be the observer of our minds, of our feelings, as we live within structures that we may not particularly like or agree with. But we have volunteered to live within that structure. Then the aim is to observe. And of course that takes patient endurance. So in the title it says, patient endurance, a critical quality. And I'm not quite sure whether it means critical in the sense of criticizing or it's necessary. I mean, critical can mean absolutely necessary. Well, I think that's probably the better meaning. Because mindfulness isn't critical. It's not about criticizing or saying what's wrong and right, but it's observing both wrong and right. It's where you get perspective on the conditions of your thoughts and emotions and physical experiences. So now the tea has appeared on the suvri. Thank you, Lada. And I'll always go away from here always thinking of Kunlada, who's been doing this ever since we came to this place. There's a kind of generosity extended to the Sangha here and to all of us to make these afternoons enjoyable. So I'll stop here, and then you have a cup of tea, and in 20 minutes or so, if you're interested, you can reassemble and have discussion.